All right, thank you. Order of business, first order of business is pledge of allegiance. If you please stand and join us in reciting our pledge of allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Council, we have a short active agenda here. We're going to move right into discussion items. Please note that identifying an item as an action item does not require the city council to vote on that item. Item A is the 2025 annual comprehensive financial report presentation from President Gage on the 2025 annual comprehensive financial report. This is an action item, and we will hear from our treasurer finance director, Amy Gordon. So Amy, I'll turn it over to you to begin. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council, Amy Gordon, Finance Director. I appreciate you all being here this afternoon ahead of your regular meeting tonight. This is our opportunity to introduce our auditors to the council and for you to get an expanded review of the financial report that will be then presented to you tonight for formal adoption. This is the end of like a 5-month work project, so we're relieved to be here today. And a lot of time and effort and energy go into this. So thanks to our auditor for and her staff for the work that they put into this. Thank you to my staff for all the work that they do, especially Claire, our accounting supervisor. She puts a lot of time and effort into the report and putting those books together for you guys each year. And we'll turn it over to Dawn Aliberti from President Gage. She's an associate partner there in charge of our audit. So she works with her team of staff to review all of our transactions and help us put this book together. Just really appreciative of her and her staff and making it such an easy process and being cooperative. Let's just go through it.
Thank you. Thank you, Amy, Mayor, City Council. I'm going to grab the keyboard. Mayor, where's the best place you want me to be? At the end?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Are we filming this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we just need to remember to speak up.
Okay.
You know what, Don, how about if I put you right here and I'll move you in?
Or I can sit over on the other
No,
side there.
then you can buy this deal here, and then if people are listening at home, they can hear what you have to say.
Don't you usually sit at the head of the table? Thank you. Pleasure. Right, Councilman. Snarling at me already.
How are you?
Thank you. Thank you for having me here today, and thanks for having this special session to go over this. The audit for September 30, 2025 in a little bit more detail. As Amy indicated at the meeting tonight, it'll just be very, very quick, few minutes, and then approval for release and distribution of the financial statements. I do have just a little handout. I'm not going to go through it. I just thought maybe it would give you just a summary. Those of you who are on the audit committee has probably seen some of this, but I just want to kind of, you read it at your leisure, but take one pass around. It's just kind of an agenda or a summary of what I'm going to cover here. I will probably talk a little fast, so sometimes it's, yeah, I made 10 copies. Hopefully there's enough there, but again, it's just some summary of the information that we're going to cover here right now, and so it should be good. So as I indicated, this is a presentation of the audited financial statements as of September 30, 2025. We do start pretty early with our planning phase. We meet with, I met with the mayor and Amy and Claire. Probably was at the end of September. Yeah, at the end of September. Audit committee, some of you, we met towards the end of October. The city's working their tails off to get the books closed, all the adjustments done prior to Thanksgiving. So when Amy says 5 months, yes. So by Thanksgiving, we have audited numbers from the city, and then we start doing our audit procedures in December. kind of slows down around Christmas time because everybody's gone for the holiday, or a lot of people are gone for the holiday on my staff as well. And then we kind of kick back up in January and wrap everything up. So here we're going to talk about some required communications that we have with that the auditors have to communicate to those charged with governance, and that's you guys as the city council. As an audit firm, we're required to be independent, and so we are independent. We're the independent auditors. We are confirming what you see throughout the year is accurate. That's our job during this process. The only thing that will belong to Fresno Gage is going to be the 3 audit opinions and audit reports are within the financial statement, within this booklet. And then everything else belongs to the city. Shouldn't present any new information. So at any point during an audit, you should never be shocked about something that you see in there. There's going to be some a little bit different format maybe than what you are been reported on or shown, you know, as the year goes along. But the information should be what you hopefully would expect. And you know, verifies the accuracy and the quality of your accounting records. So just kind of talking about that we, as Fresno Gage, we have audited the financial statements of the city of Lewiston as of September 30, 2025, and we're in conformance with our auditing requirements. What we have audited is the government activities, business type activities, all the component unit, which is the URA, and all the remaining funds. And just kind of give you an idea, when I say governmental activities, I'm talking about the general fund, transportation, capital projects, economic development, cemetery, library, public transportation, fleet, workers' comp, information system, and then the business type activities would be your water, wastewater, sanitation, and stormwater. And the component unit is the Urban Renewal Agency of the City of Lewiston, which is in the financials as well. And some of the remaining funds is the cemetery. We talked about the cemetery. We have the Cemetery Perpetual Care Fund. So it's the whole city, all the funds within the city. And within the handout I gave you, I kind of outlined what all the funds were, so you're aware of what's being discussed here today. So what we have, the book in front of you is called the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report. I don't know, the book, and I happen to bring mine that from last year. Every year I go through it and I mark on it and I tag it and spill tea on it. So mine always looks very worn a year later because I like to go back through it when I'm working on the next year. But in the book is broken into 5 sections. So you have the introductory section. So that's going to be the letter from the mayor, talking about the year, talking about the city, your certificate of achievement for the finance report from the GFOA, and then some structure. Then you get into the financial overview. That's the guts of it for the most part. So you have the management discussion and analysis. That is a great place to go if you're looking for a summary of what went on within the city, and you know, that's maybe something that you want to be familiar with when citizens ask you a question. Pretty much a lot of the information is in that first section. It's just a really quick summary. And then we get into the guts that we're kind of talk about, a lot of the numbers, and then some supplemental information, statistical information, great data, what's going on with the city over a 10-year period of time, and then the single audit. So those are the 5 sections. As I mentioned, what belongs to Fresno Gage is the audit opinion, and the first audit opinion on page 11 is, do the financial statements represent what really happened in the city's finances for the year? And this is an unmodified opinion, which is clean, best opinion you can have. So it's a multiple page report, and I summed it up in one little sentence. It does have discussions on some who's responsible for what the auditors are responsible for, and what management is responsible for. And we'll cover a little bit of that kind of quickly here in the next couple slides, and that's part of what I call the required communication of that. Another, excuse me, report, it's on page, you don't have to flip if you don't want to, page 165 and 1 through 167 is an opinion on the federal grants. So the city of Lewiston expended more than $1 million during the fiscal year. So they're required to have a single audit or an audit in compliance with uniform guidance. And there's a report on that. So there's specific discussions or specific tests and reviews that we have to do for that. Putting this thing together, we call it the schedule expenditures of federal awards together, which we'll talk about later, takes a lot of work for the city staff to do. And I know Claire spent a lot of time tracking down those grants and making sure that is there federal money in those grants and is it not, or that kind of thing. So it does take a lot of work in making sure that it's on the accrual basis of accounting. So it's a challenging event, and then we get to audit that. We have all the fun, right? The third report is a report on internal accounting controls and compliance, page 163 to 164. And again, that is a clean opinion. We don't have any findings on the control issues there. I talked about some required communications. We're required to conduct our audit and follow standards. That's one of the requirements that we have for the auditors. We are responsible for conducting our audit to gain a reasonable assurance, not an absolute assurance, that the financial statements are free of material misstatements. And I always stop and make sure that everybody understands in an audit, we're not auditing every single transaction that goes on. We're doing some sample testing. We're verifying to third-party documentation, that kind of thing, but not at 100% level. So we're getting a reasonable assurance of that. As auditors, we're required to have exercise professional judgment, identify risks, have an understanding of the controls, evaluate accounting policies, and whether the city will continue operating for the next 12 months. And so we have no issues with that. With management is responsible for preparing the financial statements and making sure that the information is accurate, designing and having internal controls that are appropriate and operating efficiently, and making sure that accounting policies, they have appropriate accounting policies. There are some accounting estimates also in these financial statements. For the most part, every financial statement has some kind of estimate, and it's, a guess or whatever you want to call it, but an allowance for uncollectible accounts would be considered an estimate. How much are you going to collect on those accounts receivable? And for the city, that for the most part, we're looking at utilities and ambulance billing are the kind of the key areas. Yes, there's other receivables from grants and things like that, but the key ones are that useful lives of assets. How long is something going to last? That's an estimate. The medical insurance unpaid claims, that's an estimate after you're in. Workers' comp, the pension, asset liabilities from leasing, and any compensated absences. Those are some key areas. In these financial statements is also the assets of the airport. 50% of the assets of the airport authority. The city and county jointly own that activity, and they're included in here at 50%. The airport additions for the year was about 1.1 million, so the city has 50% of that picked up. Component unit, the Urban Renewal Agency, in the first few pages, there'll be a column on the right-hand side that specifically identifies the component unit, and that is audited separately. Presnell Gage also does that audit, and we are completed with that. We haven't issued it final. It usually will be presented at the March meeting. But a draft has gone and been reviewed, so we're good with that. The City Employee Benefit Plan Trust is also a separate audit. It's included in this packet. Presnell Gage has audited that as well, and that was issued prior to December 31st. The requirements with the Department of Insurance is that it is filed and issued and submitted within 3 months of the year. The police retirement is a fiduciary fund, also reported in here, the police retirement, that's a closed plan. Some terms that you're going to hear me talk about here in a little bit when we get into the numbers is accrual basis of accounting. That's going to be recognizing income when it's earned and expenses when that expense is incurred. And modified accrual basis of accounting is going to be, accrual and cash. So that's how the city operates more on a day-to-day basis, is more on a modified accrual basis of accounting. To kind of start, we're going to start with the statement of net position and a statement of activities. And these are starts on page 34 of your big book. And I just want to cover some highlights of items on here. Again, these statements, these few pages that I'm going to talk about first are on the accrual basis of accounting. So some key items that I wanted to point out, and I like to highlight in green when it means money. So if you see green, it's usually because I'm pointing out. So cash and investments. So total cash and total investments for the city government-wide is $91,600,000. Of that, current of $69 million, non-current of $22 million, and $22 million is restricted investments for one purpose or another.
A question for you.
Yes.
Now that, your little green highlighted thing.
Yep.
Isn't on here?
Nope.
You just added it up somewhere?
I put it on my slide. But so what I added up that adds up to the 91 million is in that total column is the 44, the 25, and the 22 million. So those add up to that 91 million. The 44 million and the 25 add up to the 69 as current assets, and then the non-current would be the 22 million in the lower section, mid-page.
Can we get a copy of your slides?
The city has a copy of the slides. Mm-hmm. I emailed them and happy to. Maybe that's why I should have passed that.
No, that's just to make sure we have myself.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So just like to point out that the other item I like to point out is the capital assets, what the city has as equipment, buildings, land, infrastructure, you name it, is a capital asset. This is net of accumulated depreciation. So capital assets in the city is $247,659,000, and then broke up into what's a government activities and business type, $103 million for government and $144 for business. Okay. And that's in that blue section below. The other
Does that include the airport?
that includes the 50% of the airport, and that would be in the government column. Government activities column. Also included in there would be, any sort of your infrastructure for under business type is going to be your water, wastewater, sanitation, and stormwater is going to be in your business. Fleet, that's going to be in your governmental. So if your fleet, information systems, those kinds of things, they're going to fall into the governmental category and are reported there.
So was it non-restricted investments? Where's the airport one again?
It's buried. It's going to be part of the governmental activities, capital assets. So the airport and all the property and everything involved in that is going to be, there's going to be a part of it in land, there's going to be a part of it in buildings. Back in the detail, in the notes of the financial statements, on page 63 and 64, will show the airport as separate lines on those totals. So if you're curious, what 50% of the airport assets are that are included in the city's books. They're listed there. So if you see land, airport land and improvements, airport runway, there's some construction progress going on down there, and there's airport equipment. So if you're curious, and then if you go to the midway through page 64, you'll see the net capital assets for government and business, and so it's the cost of the assets minus the accumulated depreciation will get you to those rows, or get you those columns that I'm showing you in the blue as a summary. So those are really great pages if you're wanting to see things broke out. When you talk in internal service, that's where your fleet is going to be. Your fleet and information systems is in that category there. That's what the internal service means. Great questions. I sometimes skip over some of the notes, but there's so much valuable information in there that support all these numbers that we're talking about. We'll get into the liabilities, and here, some of the numbers I'd like to point out is, for the most part, the big debt items are going to be in the business type, and that's your water and wastewater bonds that are outstanding. I have highlighted kind of in the pink the bond with the current portion. You'll see that's only in the business type, so that's water and wastewater. The line in the blue down at the bottom, right down in here, you'll see net investments in capital assets. So what that does is it takes those asset numbers from the prior page, subtract out any sort of debt related to those assets, which would also include any kind of accounts payable or retainage on those. And this is how much money is invested net of debt in your capital assets.
I got a question from the 10 pages forward.
Sure.
From
No, you're fine.
34.
Yep.
The ones that said the restricted investments, are those like the policeman's fund and those retirement type funds? Is that what
Those funds are in business type, and I believe, Amy can correct me if I'm wrong, those are because of bond requirements, I believe, those
restricted investments?
Yeah, and I think there is some in governmental, like the police investments would be restricted. But yeah, the bond requirements on the water and wastewater loans have some restrictions where we have to set so much aside in a bond reserve account. We have our debt service cash for the annual payment. And then also they have equity buy-ins. Will equity buy-ins be in that restricted number as well? Because they have a narrow scope of how you can use those fees.
Also, the police retirement, that retirement plan is not in these sections. It's reported separately. So if you're curious, when I say about what's going on with the bond, we talked about the assets, and if you're also curious about what's going on with the debt, on page 65, 66, and 67 are the breakdown showing the debt. Talks about the interest rates, the borrowing, future payments, and how much was paid down on those. And I do have a slide here that does talk about the debt a little bit here. So we have the wastewater total balance due at 9/30/25 was $24,688,000. During the year, principal payment of $1,811,000 was paid, and interest of $329,000. On the water, $39,440,000 is this balance outstanding, and a principal payment of $1,334,000 was paid with the interest plus interest of $657,000 during the year. So on those pages of 65 and 66, you'll see what the obligation is going to be going forward for both the water and wastewater. It will also show you what's the component unit, which is the Urban Renewal Agency, what's owed on that loan as well.
So with those, the loans, what shows here the years, like, for instance, the water loan is through 2049,
Yes,
and then the wastewater is 2038.
yes.
Okay.
Basically the payoff. Payoff, based on the amortization schedule. At some point, at some point, if the city decides to come up with 40 million, want to pay it off early, you can, right? You, huh? Without penalty. So you'll notice that the water loan is at a 1.625%. So I would, anybody else want a loan that's 1.625%? Yeah, pick me, right? And then of course, and then the wastewater loan is at 1.26. The Urban Renewal Agency loan is a little higher as a variable, but. Just some things I like to point out in those sections of kind of the key areas of the statement of net position or your balance sheet. The next page I'll point out is the statement of activities, and it's kind of an odd statement. It's required to be presented this way by government standards. So the expenses are on the far left going down, and then there's income. So as I show you here, you have expenses and they go down here. So total expenses for total primary government is 61 million. Charges for services, operating grants and contributions, capital grants listed here. And then here's where your taxes, franchise fees, some interest. This is awesome. 1.5 million is what your investments have done on the government side. 1.8 on the business type. And then some other items here. The change in net position, which is your income for the year. So in the governmental activities, you had income of 10,528,000. On the business type, you had 15,687,000. When I say that, we're on the accrual-based accounting. So if the city put money into some infrastructure for water, wastewater, that's being capitalized. So that expense doesn't hit here. It does on the business. It will on the business type. They're always accrual, so it's never going to hit. But when the city government-wide, the governmental activities has capital additions, then they are capitalized and appreciated. When we get to the fund accounting statements, I'll show you that those capital assets aren't on there. So there's a little bit difference.
So does that one, the other government revenues, is that broken down anywhere here? Is it?
I don't have this other government revenues right here.
Yeah.
I do not have it broke down, but if you wish to have what's in there, I can put that together and give it to you. That's something that you want.
Amy probably has.
Yeah,
if it was in
I can't remember what all goes in there. But. So when we talk about the balance sheet and what's the day-to-day, how the city kind of reports their information on a day-to-day basis, page 37, this is going to be your governmental funds. So here presented the four funds that I'm showing here, the general, transportation, capital projects, and economic development, are what's considered the major funds within the city. Then other governmental funds is listed all in one column. They are broke out on page 94. If you want to see, it's kind of, I know you're flipping around, I know it's hard. It's hard.
This is the totals. Can you say that again? I'm sorry.
Yes, so the total governmental funds is going to be here,
Okay.
but the major funds of the city is the general transportation, capital projects and economic development, and then all the other funds, which would be transit, library, cemetery, missing one, cemetery perpetual care are all gonna be in this other column here. One of the things I want to point out on this screen is this is on how you would, this is the modified accrual. So this is kind of how the city would look at on a regular day-to-day basis. You'll notice that there's no capital assets and there's no debt here because that's not how you report these. So what I want to show you on the governmental funds here, the fund balance, which we happy sometimes to call it the carryover, is $40 million. Of that 40 million of the governmental funds, 9.7 million is unassigned money. So that's basically out of the 40 million, a lot of it's already spoken for. It's under capital projects, building reserves, reserve for perpetual care money, what have you. The 9.7 million is what's available to be spent at your discretion.
9 million.
9,000,007. And that comes out of the general fund. So the general fund's carryover is 16 million and the unassigned is the 9.7. On page 39, this is the revenues and expenditures, same types of categories. This is going to be for the governmental, same major funds. And then I'll shoot down to the bottom, net change in fund balance. So you'll see the general fund had a loss, economic development had a loss, and then there's a loss of those group of funds. Now, when you do your budgeting and you budget to use fund reserves for expenses, we're going to use some of our reserves. We're not out here to grow capital. We're here to support this, city and make it bigger and better and have our citizens. Well, when you use and plan to use fund balances from years prior, you're often going to have a loss in those years because you're planning to use money you've already accumulated over prior years for expenses in that current year. Does that make sense? So that's why sometimes you'll see you have these losses and you're like, you don't want to be too quick to be shocked because you may be something that you had planned to do by using some of those reserves. And often what happens is over a couple years, you're like, we're trying to build those reserves because we're planning to do something, X. And then you use those and then it looks like it's a loss. So that's all part of, the budgeting and the planning and the use process that you all go through, come August when you're talking about budgets and using funds and when the fun really begins, right? And here's where I talked about the carryover. The non-major governmental funds, like I said, is on page 94. I do have a summary of them here. So cemetery, library, public transit, and cemetery perpetual care. You'll see that there's a transfer between the cemetery perpetual care and the cemetery fund. That's the only transfer that you're going to see. The city voted a number of years ago, city citizens, to not have transfers. However, Idaho, I think it's under a statute actually, that cemetery perpetual care is in the business of giving money to the cemetery fund. There are specific requirements, investment earnings, that kind of thing, to allow that transfer that occur. So that you'll see that. You'll see too, cemetery always seems to run with a tight budget there. Yeah, library, public transportation, that's transit. So there was been some activity in transit during the year for capital projects, things like that. So you'll see that they'll be reported here.
Just
Yes.
a quick question
Yes.
about the earnings on investments. For the cemetery, is that just the perpetual care fund or is there something else?
The earnings,
Is it in the,
the 136,000,
The 15,000 to that. Right there.
that
was
is gonna be on their interest earnings on their checking account.
Okay.
It's a perpetual care is reported off to the right under its own separate fund,
Yeah,
or its own separate column.
thank you.
Yeah, this perpetual care, their investment earnings is 136,000. Talk about the proprietary, these are the ones I talked about on the front couple pages, 34, 35. Basically, these totals are going to be exactly the totals that were on those prior pages. These funds are reported on the accrual basis of accounting. They're supposed to be self-sustaining, self-supporting. So it isn't going to be the tax funds here. It's the services that you're providing. You're getting funds to do that, and then that's what's reported here. So these numbers are going to be what's reported on those prior pages. As well as there's the debt that I had pointed out before. But they are separately identified by fund here. So you can also see on this particular, this is the liability. Here's the income, the revenue and expenses, so you can see what each fund did for the year. So remember that here, when one of these funds spends money on some sort of capital project, it doesn't hit their expense line. It goes in as an asset on this line. And then it's depreciated over the useful life of the asset. So the expense then gets here under the depreciation over the time and the length of time of that particular asset. So if you buy a truck that's gonna suck sewer, suck stormwater, for whatever it runs, 300, 400, 500 million or $1,000, it's going to be capitalized and depreciated over whatever you think it's going to last. Off the top of my head, I don't know how many years that is, but that you guys are doing that, probably 7 to 10, I would imagine. Okay. Talked a little bit about the fiduciary funds. These are not included in those statements that they're not part of that. They're reported separately. So here's what we're talking about. This is the employee retirement plan. This is that police retirement account. $14 million is sitting there. That's funds that are spoken for. Those are for those retirees. Currently, there's now 29. At year end, there was 30. But now there's 29, and that could be those retirees or their spouses who are receiving those benefits still. This every other year, there's an actuarial report that's done to help identify if there's additional liabilities and things that need to be picked up for that. But the city hasn't paid into the account for, has it been a while?
Several years.
It's been a while. So it's funding itself. It's actually, based on what the actuary says, it's overfunded. So the investments and the money sitting in the bank account here, or investment accounts, is plenty enough to cover what the actuary believes the obligation will be. And I think it's like at 127% or something like that is the funding rate of that. Of course, if the market were to tank, that could change as well. So it is.
Which had been once before.
Yeah, it does. It has happened, and but anyway, it's doing very well. And this employee benefit plan is the health plan. And again, it has money because it's got to be able to pay your self-insured portions of your health. Again, you'll see here where the employee benefit plan trust, it had net fair value, you know, it had a great unrealized gain this year of 800,000, so that could sway what goes on. But Internal service funds, we talked a little bit about that real briefly. They're listed here. This is fleet, workers' comp, and information system. My slides here.
I don't know why you're looking, I'm gonna ask Amy a quick question about the check that we received from Rogers. Where did you?
The water capital contribution from private sources. Was after year end though? So it won't be in these numbers. It won't be in these numbers because I believe it was after year end.
So other things that you'll see in here towards the, after the footnotes, you'll see what's required supplemental information. In that is the budget comparison schedules for the major funds. No funds exceeded the budget. The PERSI, there's some forms that talk about for the last 10 years, what percentage of the PERSI funds belong to the city, how much covered payroll, that kind of thing, how much was paid in is listed there. You have a base PERSI plan. You also have the firefighter pension plan within PERSI, and then there's the police retirement. So there's actually 3 different things to talk about. The fire portion of the PERSI is also overfunded by quite a bit as well. And
That was on which page?
page 86 and 87 is where that starts. I think I have the page numbers. So if you look at page 86, you'll see that very top line is the employer's portion of the net liability. So because the city's portion of that retirement fund, it's underfunded by about 9%. So you'll see that bottom number about midway through says 91%. So that's 91% is the funded amount of the PERSI account. And so each government agency within the state of Idaho has to pick up based on their employer what portion of liability if business ended on that day. That has been calculated by actuaries.
They're saying it's, where's the 90%? 91% is the.
Is the
amount
funding amount, is funded amount. So if
So it's only funded at 91%, I see.
for
Okay.
the whole states.
Right.
PERSI plan is funded at 91%. And
So it's like a 8% or so.
yeah, 9%. And so yeah, if yours is, 11, and you're one of the bigger cities, you'll see that your portion and share is 0.48.
So a mistake under 2021 for the FRF plan, I think. First covered payroll says 49 million.
I'm sorry. Is that?
All in 2021, down on the FRF,
Yes.
first word payroll, 49 million.
Oh.
I'm that guy, I just read.
Oh
it.
my gosh.
So- But wait a minute, there's a footnote. Put the balance into the mayor.
The mayor.
Wait a minute, never mind, Dawn.
Okay, well, we will need to probably change that page.
Oh, because you saw such a jump, right? Is that what made you?
Yeah,
Why-
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Quite a jump. Yeah. Maybe
Well,
it's just
even
a
the
comment.
percentage dropped way down.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Thanks, Mayor.
Oh, yeah. 30 pages.
That's what I get for pointing out that page.
No, it's good. It's all good. That's what we're here for.
Okay. And I was talking earlier about the federally expended funds. So the city of Lewiston expended 7 million. This is on the very last couple pages of the report. 7,561,000 was the total federal funds expended during the year. So when I say expended, because let's say a government agency, which does happen, they gave you, $7 million and you stuck it in the bank, and but until you actually spend it, does it go onto this report? So that's what happened with some of those. Actually, I think the fund that had the money this year, the coronavirus, which was the major fund that was tested in detail, was 4.5 million. Well, 4.5 million is made up of. I know it's hard to see.
Yeah, I can't tell if it's now changes or not.
Yeah, it should, because I copied it right out of there. So
So is that's on page 71 though, right? 171.
171. Yeah, 171, and then the 170 is the rest of it there. And that's. Other things that we want to make sure we communicate is if we have any adjustments during our audit. And why is talking about adjustments during our audit important for you guys to know is as you're going month to month or meeting to meeting and talking about the finances and making business decisions on what to spend money on and what projects to do, and you get that financial information and you make a decision on it, and if the auditor rolls in after year end and goes, oh, no, we need to have more liability or more this or more that or change, you might think, oh gosh, maybe I didn't make a good business decision because I didn't have good numbers to go off of. Now, as far as audited numbers, I don't think we had any adjustments that we recommended. There were a few what the city calls period 13. So the books are mostly closed, but there's some things that when they're reconciling get noticed and they need to be adjusted. They weren't very significant this year. In these reports, in the first few pages that I talked about, there is no encumbrance accounting used, so we take that out and then we help with the per se adjustment. But other than that, there isn't adjustments that should have changed your opinion on a decision that you made throughout the year that changed the financial numbers. We didn't have any disagreements with management regarding accounting, policies, reporting, anything like that. And during our audit, we did not become aware of any fraud or illegal acts during the audit. And again, to recap, the reports that belong to President Gage that we covered in the beginning are all clean reports. And I want to thank the city staff for always getting us information in a very timely fashion, walking through information with us, and we can't do our audit unless the finance department is doing their job, and with that, if we did have some difficulties and that kind of thing, we wouldn't be sitting here today. We had talked a long time ago. I talked to the mayor, we talked to that, and we'd be already having those conversations. So that's what I have for you tonight as more detail. I know it's hard to take 171 pages and try to talk about it, but hopefully I get the highlights for you. And if you have questions, feel free to ask those. The audit committee, we did meet at the end of July and we talked about a few things there. The audit committee is, I know, kind of seen it as the liaison with the community to kind of bring items if they have any, they've heard something in the community and want to bring something to us. In the planning stage, that's why we meet in October. The audit committee meets in October, and then they can communicate with me. And then we meet again. Their job also is to make sure that transparency is there, making sure that they're making sure that we as auditors are doing what we're supposed to be doing as well. Help with that process. And then, the mayor always keeps me on my toes too. He'll give me a call if he has questions throughout the year or something going on. Different departments, maybe we visit and we have, recommendations probably, for this year, maybe oral. I was over looking at the ambulance billing and how that process works. And one of the comments I made to Amy was that there's some cross training that needs to be done and making sure that that's done. So if something happens to the folks that are involved in doing that process, that it can continue without a hiccup at some point. So I know that they're working towards making sure that there's some cross training to have other people available, and that's you said possible. That's what I have for you. Yes, you have a question?
Yeah, so here on the identification of major programs, the
Yes.
CFBA numbers,
Yeah.
it says auditee qualified as low risk. What does that with the
So when we do our audits, and auditee is the city, and we have to do assessments of whether you fall into a low risk or not low risk is what they call it. So if the city has received an audit, a single audit, like we have over the major funds, in the last 2 years, 1 year in the last 2 years, and then there was no findings, then you can qualify as a low risk. So what that allows the auditors then is only are required to test 25% of the total funds. If it's not a low risk, then we're required to test 40% of the federal funds expended during the year. So that's an identification of the amount. So and a lot of it's about risk and risk assessment also, but if the city, this happens a lot where we have some government agencies that they go right along and they're having an audit because they need an audit, they're over the revenue threshold, and they have a big water project or usually a big sewer project or something like that, and they get federal funds. Now they have to have this single audit, and they haven't been audited under that in the prior 2 years. They automatically go to being high risk. As auditors, we would have to look at 40% of those expenditures and 40% of the group of expenditures. So it's not, but that's how it works out. Did I explain that very well? There's a lot of hoo-ha that goes into going through and doing that. But
Yeah, I was just curious why it was singled out.
No, perfect. No, that's a great question. But yes, they consider low risk. So one of the things is when we're assessing that low risk, that page 168, if there were some yeses in there, then it may cause you to not be a low risk. You have to be certain types of findings. Did I do it under an hour?
Good job.
You should go get some rest and something to drink before.
Yes. So the slide presentation, I had emailed a copy to Amy, and the IT who's showing it on screen has a copy. So
Copy to the council members, yeah.
You're gonna add it to the package?
and then we will get that page fixed.
Yeah.
And we
Do we
will.
have to do anything special in approving it tonight?
So tonight at the formal meeting, I have a little blurb that indicated that we went through it in detail tonight, what the opinions of the reports will, and then I usually you approve the release of the financial statements. So a lot of entities will like approve the audit, that kind of thing. Well, the audit is the audit is the audit, you know. But basically the council needs to approve it to be released. And what will happen after that is, once we get the page fixed, but it'll be published on the website. The city will then, or finance department will then send their reports or send it in with the state. Then they'll work on, for the end of March, getting the application for the outstanding achievement for financial reporting. And anything else that you guys? I say just,
The
but it's,
clearinghouse, you'll.
yeah, and the federal clearinghouse. So when you do have a single audit, there's another requirement where it has to, that information has to be loaded into the federal clearinghouse. Is, I don't know, a bucket where they keep track of all that by funds, and that's done all electronically. And that's the process that it's kind of taken care of after everything is done. So that will be what happens tonight. I will not talk for an hour. It'll be about 3 minutes. I swear. Jim is thrilled.
Hey, council, any questions for the questions? If not, okay.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
That was a hint at one, you know.
Someone made one. Motion to adjourn, second.
It's been moved by Trustee, second by Trustee Forsman to adjourn. Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We stand adjourned.